In this WrestleTalk news, are more releases coming to NXT 2.0? An NXT star is getting rebranded, a WWE main roster star has suddenly dropped his gimmick, and Tempest reviews last night's episode of NXT 2.0.
Support WrestleTalk!
Like it or loathe it, NXT 2.0 is definitely a show, and sometimes wrestling happens on it, and therefore it fits all the necessary criteria. Yes, it's not quite the same as old black and gold NXT when wrestlers were wrestlers and not narcoleptic women in pajamas, but don't worry, Tempest review is coming up later, so if you think that I'm biased, you just wait. Something you'll be accustomed to if you are a fan of 2.0 is your favourite wrestlers suddenly just going away and then commentary pretending they simply disappeared. Cough, Dexter Lumis. Cough. The most recent batch of NXT releases came at the end of April this year, with 10 wrestlers including Malcolm Bivens, Dakota Kai and Haaland all receiving their future endeavours. Unfortunately for fans, and even more unfortunately for the wrestlers themselves, it appears NXT releases are going to be a relatively regular occurrence, as a new report from Brian Alvarez on Wrestling Observer Live suggests we should expect a batch of releases every 6 months or so. Speaking on Observer Live, Alvarez said, "With NXT 2.0 you have 6 months to get better. Every 6 months they evaluate you, and if you aren't getting better, you are done for." Apparently they made some evaluations, including some names you would know, so we may get some changes coming to NXT. He didn't expand on which names we can expect to see leaving, and if he's right in saying it'll be on average every 6 months, then perhaps the next batch will be released around October this year. With NXT 2.0's ratings struggling to improve, perhaps it's not too surprising that WWE is frequently looking to refresh its roster to make sure they aren't paying anyone they don't have plans for. However, knowing you have just 6 months to show your worth must put a lot of pressure on a wrestler, and if you aren't being given TV time, there must be a real fear for your job security. An NXT 2.0 star who probably isn't leaving anytime soon, however, is Fabian Aichner, as he's just been given a brand new and very stereotypical gimmick. To the untrained ear, the name Fabian Aichner is not immediately Italian sounding, but I can confirm that he is indeed Italian. I even checked his Wikipedia page and it says Italy, which I can confirm is in Italy. But do you know what name is definitely Italian? Well, that would be Giovanni Vinci. And do you know what gimmick is very stereotypically Italian? Well, that would be wearing expensive suits and sunglasses. As announced during last night's episode of NXT 2.0, Giovanni Vinci will be making his in-ring debut next week, where I imagine he'll come down to the ring and tell everyone he wears Armani suits while gesticulating a lot. Remember, he's Italian, and that's really all you need to know about his gimmick. Until very recently, he was a part of Imperium, but for whatever reason was not called up to the main roster at the same time as Gunther and Ludwig Kaiser, or as they were called back in NXT, Walter and Marcel Bartel, which is still quite sad to think about. And speaking of stereotypes, one person who appears to have changed his gimmick is Apollo Crews. Crews made a surprise appearance on last night's episode of NXT 2.0, and it was immediately obvious to everyone watching that he no longer had his Nigerian Prince gimmick and was no longer speaking in a Nigerian accent. There was also no sign whatsoever of Commander Aziz, and judging by a tweet from WWE's official account which said Apollo is back home, this could well be another Dolph Ziggler situation where Crews spends a number of weeks in NXT getting over new talent. If you think I have spoken about NXT 2.0 a lot, well, I hope you don't mind a little bit more, because here is Tempest with his weekly review.
I mean, maybe Apollo Crews was just renting his accent. What's going on, WrestleTalk friends and fans? Tempest is back with another review of NXT 2.0 in about 5 minutes. So this show opened with a victory speech from Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams. Trick Williams talked about how the Golden State Warriors were going to beat the Boston Celtics, which really threw me off considering Carmelo Hayes is from Boston. He was like wearing a jersey recently and everything. But Melo calls himself the goal of NXT, at which point he is interrupted by Solo Sikoa, who is then interrupted by Grayson Waller, and a big brawl breaks out and a main event is scheduled for later in the show. The most interesting parts of NXT are usually within the North American title program, so if you have that open and close the show, that's probably a good indication for this episode of NXT. This opening promo gets a 3 out of 5. Tony D'Angelo tells Santos Escobar that he has a match later on, and then Josh Briggs took on Von Wagner in the opener. Not the match I would have booked. I mean, the crowd was chanting Greenberg at Von Wagner. That's a deep cut. I mean, does a main angle on WCW count as a deep cut these days? At one point, Von Wagner smashed Brooks Jensen's broken hand into the ringside apron, at which point Fallon Henley got on the apron to distract the referee, allowing Brooks Jensen to slide his cast to Josh Briggs, who hit Von Wagner with it, cheating to win the match. Who am I supposed to be cheering for on this show? Babyfaces and heels really don't matter at this point, and Von Wagner, I have no time for the man. This gets a 2 out of 5. Pretty Deadly interrupted Thea Hale getting her scholarship from Chase U. Ah yes, I also hated when wrestlers walked across the stage at my commencement. We then got Nathan Frazier taking on Santos Escobar. Now this is a perfect example of sports entertainment ruining a match. Maybe ruining is a strong word, but the gimmick of this match was that Tony D'Angelo wasn't satisfied with how Santos Escobar was wrestling. He kept telling him to change things, and it really affected Santos Escobar's focus, leading to Nathan Frazier eventually getting the win. And that's all well and good, and I probably shouldn't expect too much out of a TV match, but if Nathan Frazier and Santos Escobar were just allowed to go out there and wrestle, they'd have a much better match than this. Nathan Frazier's got a cool little like comet thing that goes down to his entrance spot. I really like that. I like Nathan Frazier. His music's cool. Santos Escobar was not happy about losing whatsoever, and Nathan Frazier picks up another big win. This was a good enough match. This gets a 3 out of 5. Braun Breaker then made his way down to ringside, happy to put Joe Gacy behind him. I mean, I would be too, as he was then interrupted by the returning Apollo Crews. The accentless Apollo Crews. Braun Breaker had just gotten finished saying that NXT was special, and then Apollo Crews came out to try and reaffirm that. I thought this was a really excellent segment with Apollo Crews coming out and making sure everyone knows that he is returning to NXT full time, and he has his eyes set on the NXT Championship, but he wants to earn it. Crews said that he left NXT too soon last time and left a lot of things on the table that he still wanted to accomplish, one of which being the NXT Championship, and he said that he would see Braun Breaker down the road. This was a perfect return to NXT. This gets a 5 out of 5. Joe Gacy's Druids are going to make their debut next week as the Dyad, and then we got the finals of the NXT Breakout Women's Tournament as Roxanne Perez took on Tiffany Stratton. These two traded much bigger near falls than you would usually see in your average top of the hour NXT match, but Tiffany Stratton missed a moonsault. Kinda. She still kinda hit it, but she missed a moonsault as Roxanne Perez rolled out of the way and hit the Pop Rocks for the win. Roxanne Perez winning the breakout tournament as she should. This was another very solid match, and again, Roxanne Perez is one of the best wrestlers on the NXT roster, male or female, and then after the match, Toxic Attraction came out to run her down, and she just had none of it. As Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez brawled with Toxic Attraction, I really hope Roxanne Perez is the one to take the title off of Mandy Rose. I don't know why Mandy Rose had to beat her a month ago, but oh well. This was another solid segment. This gets a 4 out of 5. Bodie Hayward was attacked backstage. Wendy Chu threw her drink into Tiffany Stratton's face, and then we got Andre Chase taking on Pretty Deadly in a 2-on-1 handicap match. I feel like if I describe every single Andre Chase match, they all end up the exact same way. It's a comedy match. It's fine. They do the Chase U thing. In this one, Bodie Hayward crawled down to the ring selling his injury, only for Thea Hale to get up on the apron, slap one of the members of Pretty Deadly, and then they just hit their finish on Andre Chase and won. Again, these matches are fine. The Chase U thing gets over with the crowd great, but the matches are all kind of the same, and therefore I don't really have different ways to review them. Pretty Deadly should have won by disqualification. She's not allowed to hit them. Anyways, it was what it was, 2 out of 5. Carmelo Hayes and Tony D'Angelo had a tense conversation, and then Alba Fire took on Tatum Paxley's excellent music. If Tatum Paxley and Nathan Frazier somehow wanted to make a tag team of awesome music, I'm here for it. This was another short match with Alba Fire hitting the move formerly known as the KLR bomb, and then hitting a Swanton bomb to get the win, and then after the match she was kicked right in the face by Lash Legend, and that appears to be her next program. More stuff that was just fine. Alba Fire could go to the main roster at this point. They could probably use the help. This match gets a 2 out of 5. Roderick Strong is in the back telling the Creed brothers about how proud he is of them, when Idris Inoue and Malik Blade come in, ask for a tag title shot, and are granted one, only for Roderick Strong to say that they failed their first test as NXT Tag Team Champions, saying that nobody gets a tag title shot without earning one. We got the confirmation that Giovanni Vinci is indeed the new name of Fabian Aichner, and then we got the main event as Solo Sikoa teamed up with the returning Apollo Crews to take on Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams. Again, when the North American title picture opens and closes the show, that makes for a better than average episode of NXT. Apollo Crews is one of the guys that I think would have really benefited from having a North American title in NXT when he was there. There was a whole host of NXT stars that never really got to have consistent main event matches because they were never at the level to be NXT champion, but with a North American title that offers people like Apollo Crews the chance to have main event matches, and maybe we'll see him hold that title in the future. Solo Sikoa is still very clearly being positioned as the next challenger for the North American Championship, as he and Carmelo Hayes brawled outside the ring as Apollo Crews hit the spin-out powerbomb on Trick Williams for the win. Between this and his promo, I love the return of Apollo Crews on this show. I've never thought that he's really lived up to his potential on the main roster, or in NXT the first time for that matter, and if this run gives him a chance to fix that, I'll be a very happy camper. This gets a 4 out of 5 for the main event, and this was a pretty darn solid episode of NXT as a whole. It gets a 4 out of 5 as well. And that just about wraps it up for me. If you want to hear more about this episode of NXT, make sure you check out the Mocha 2.0 podcast over on WrestleTalk podcast later on today. And until then, man, I run out of things to plug. I don't know, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Tempest Likes Wrestling. I haven't plugged that one in a while.
In this WrestleTalk news, there's some major developments backstage in WWE with Stephanie McMahon, Warner Bros are seemingly anti-MJF, Luke's review of Raw, and more. Subscribe and enable notifications to always on for daily wrestling news videos.
Support WrestleTalk!
It's been just over 2 weeks since Stephanie McMahon announced that she was taking a leave of absence from